Welcome, everyone. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. This is episode 271. I am your host, Diana Catherine Penn, and today on the program we have Jeff Boats. Jeff is an author I met at several different events around the state of Michigan, and I've invited him to come on the program and read a little bit for us. Hey, Jeff, welcome.
Hey,
Thanks for coming.
how's it going? Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. I'm really excited to learn about your work. When I saw you for the first time out on the west side of the state, you really captivated me with your story's pitch. And I really want to share this with my audience. Before we start, though, I want to make sure that those of you out in listener land understand that in Jeff's reading today, there may be a listener advisory for strong language, violence, and mature situations. So, as I always tell you, if you have little ears nearby, you may want to preview this episode before you share it with them, just to be on the safe side. So, Jeff, tell me about your writing career. How did you decide to start writing? I know that you're a college professor
Yeah, mathematics.
in mathematics, which is so opposite from writing books.
I don't know. I don't know
Um,
because my first my doctoral dissertation was writing a linear algebra textbook. I've always felt I was more of an
okay, I
artist than a scientist anyway.
I still don't think that a linear mathematical textbook is a real. I don't see that as creative writing, but
It's not
I mean,
creative, no.
you could go ahead and call it creative writing, but
But you know, but even before I started working on that dissertation, I was writing really stupid short stories to show my friends with these characters I dreamed up. And I always imagined, when I was in grad school, I wasn't just working on my research. I was writing screenplays. I was writing short stories. I writing, little novellas, and I hardly ever showed anybody because they were terrible. Because that's how all writers start, right?
of
You just
course,
gotta
yes.
you do it for a while, and then maybe 25 years go by, and my mom passes away. And the house gets really quiet for my dad, and he starts reading a lot. And it was always movies before, but then books. And he always loved really smart action heroes. That was his favorite. His
Okay,
favorite was Jack Reacher.
all right.
So he's passed away a couple years ago now too. So he never got to see my books in print, although he did read the first
Hmm.
draft of both of the first two. And he liked the character. And I'm kind of doing this. He's sort of inspired me to finally sort of come out of the shadows and try my hand at this and apparently I'm good enough now. At least that's what people say. So I'm
That's fantastic. Well, I've seen you at festivals and at events, and you definitely sell books. So
well,
people are very happy with what you're providing for them story wise.
yeah, I hope so.
So tell me a little bit about Blood Game, which is book one in the Thomas Vale series. What's the backstory to this
Well, the
novel?
idea here is Tom Vale, he's a different kind of smart action hero. He is on the autism spectrum, what they
That
call
is unusual.
high masking. Yeah, there have been autistic heroes before, but not very well done,
Hmm.
in my opinion. And so, because a lot of times if you're on the autism spectrum, people have these stereotypes about you that you're going to be a super savant and you're always going to say the wrong thing and ain't he
That
cute?
Rain Man thing,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah.
we're not like that. I'm autistic. My son is autistic. My wife is autistic. And we're not like that at all. And I just wanted to write something authentic where you've got a hero who he's a high masking autistic, so he's very smart, he's very, very focused, but he also struggles with his environment. He struggles with sensory issues. He occasionally struggles with social situations, and he is about as not James Bond as you can come up with, but he gets the job done. And in Blood Game, he actually teams up with a woman who is like a female James Bond. She's the real deal. Whereas he actually got booted from the farm. He was a CIA recruit and he gets booted for when they figure out he's autistic. They figure he can't handle it. They relegate him to being an analyst.
Again,
But
second guessing his ability
yeah, but
based
eight
on a
years later,
stereotype, right?
but 8 years later, just by knowing the right people and through a quirk of fate, he ends up on a mission anyway, and finally has a chance to prove himself. And that's what Blood Game is all about.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. I absolutely love that you are taking an often misunderstood I hate to call it a diagnosis because that makes it sound horrible and
Well,
awful, but
that's the right word, but
it's a
autism's not a disease.
right, but it's I think I've known a lot of people with autism at various levels of the spectrum,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's a condition that's very, very misunderstood be,
Yeah.
because it is a spectrum like the rainbow, lots of different colors, lots of
Oh,
different
yeah.
bandwidths. So I'm thrilled to see that you are bringing an action hero into that world, to maybe break down some of those stereotypes.
I hope so. I mean, he has human frailties. He gets into trouble. Has romantic relationships or tries to. He does all the things, but he does them a little different because he's a little different.
I think it's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to hearing you read some of this. So when you are ready, please, Jeff, read aloud for us
All
from
right.
Blood Game, which is book one in the Thomas Vale series. The
Well,
microphone is yours, sir.
I picked out a couple of excerpts. I'll try to get through them quickly enough. The first one is I don't want to spoil too much, but something traumatic has happened to him in the middle of the mission. And in his dream that night, he remembers the worst memory of his childhood, the death of his mother and brother. So here we go. Chapter 19, Funeral. I was 14 years old back in Kilbuck in my dream that night. My big brother Matthew's casket was heavy in my hand. My father and I had the front corners, and four of his friends from the football team carried the rest of the weight. It was a slow procession. It started at our house, where we'd held the showing, and it was about to reach St. Michael's Cemetery, only 2 lots down the hill from our house. A statue of the angel Michael stood before a rusty gate that leaned to the right and hung perpetually open in a state of disrepair. Michael's arm was aloft as if to brandish a sword, but vandals had broken the arm off at the wrist long ago. 6 of my older relatives carried my mother's casket. They followed us closely, and behind them walked the rest of our family and at least 50 of Matt's high school friends. A sports reporter from the Olean Times-Herald was among them. Officer Lightfoot's patrol car flashed its blues, siren off, halting traffic for us. It was Lightfoot who had found them. The crunch of the gravel road beneath hundreds of plodding feet was not enough to drown out the sounds of nature. A chilling wind swooped down from the peak of Eagles Hill. The chirping robins of the buzzing of summer insects filled my ears. It was late morning, mid-June, with the sun breaking through the clouds. I looked up and saw it piercing the ancient swaying oaks and maples, and my tears finally began pouring in earnest. Easy, boy, my father said. We reached the gravesite and slowly set down Matt's casket. I pulled my suit coat more tightly around me. Even in June, mornings can be cold in the Appalachians. I turned to see my father looking back at my mother's casket being laid down. Officer Lightfoot had been following close behind and now stepped forward. I'm so sorry, Steve, he said to my father and saluted. My father saluted back, and the two ex-Marines stoically embraced. After they released, my father turned to me and beckoned me to follow. The large crowd shuffled about, finding places to stand in the loose perimeter about the grave sites. I recognized many of Matt's friends. I recognized only a few of my relatives. I followed my father to a row of chairs and sat next to him. Father Ken from the local Catholic church stood before us, waiting patiently for the crowd to stabilize. His white vestments were adorned with sashes of lavender and black. He spoke about God's plan, the value of sacrifice and the pain of loss. His words bounced off me and scattered into the surrounding forest. I thought about all the times I'd fled to St. Michael's to escape the bullying. Some of those bullies were now mourning my brother. I computed a quick estimate of the attendance. The number of funeral attendees seemed to be a very close number to the gravestones in the centuries-old cemetery. I found comfort in the numbers for reasons I couldn't describe. Closing my eyes, I envisioned the entire cemetery in my mind, just as I'd done many times as a kid, up late at night, mind racing, unable to sleep. If quizzed, I could probably recite every name, birth date, and death date from every stone in the grotto, even the tiny little stones in the back section for Catholic babies who died during birth or in their first year. This place of peace, my sanctuary, was now swallowing my mother and brother. Anguish crashed down on me. My hand shook. A low rumbling in the distance grew steadily louder, and before long a train passed us close by. Father Ken did his best to be heard over the clackety-clank of train cars rounding a hilly bend, but it was a futile effort. All we heard was the screech of metal on metal as freight cars curved around Eagles Hill, and all we could see was Father Ken giving unheard condolence in scripture. Mom's car had been found in the Allegheny River. They'd been returning from some sort of high school pre-graduation event. Mom had driven off the road. She was found still buckled into her seat with no signs of struggle and with a very high blood alcohol content. Probably died in her sleep. Matt was unbuckled and heavily bruised on his upper body and arms. He had tried to escape the submerged car, but didn't make it. None of this information had been made public, of course. I'd overheard it a few nights before. He was dropping Lightfoot and my father as they grieved in our basement over a card table and a bottle of whiskey. The train vanished into the distance shortly after Father Ken gave up on his sermon. My father looked relieved. We all stood. Grown-ups seemed to weave in undecipherable patterns around me. I stood stock still and watched my relatives lining up to talk to my father. Someone hugged me tight and I fought against them, pushing them away. It was a woman. I didn't look up to see her face. I just wanted to get away. Another hugger touched me and I stepped quickly back and away. I fled to the other side of the cemetery, crying. I closed my eyes and smelled the soothing petrichor. Hours seemed to pass, though they were probably minutes. I sat near one of my favorite graves and waited. The crowd eventually subsided and my father walked over to me. "Come on, TJ," he said. "Let's go home." We walked together through the old boneyard and then back toward home. My father grabbed my arm and spun me to face him. I cringed involuntarily, expecting a blow, but it didn't come. He just looked me in the eyes, and my eyes met his for the first time in years and for the last time in years. "TJ, can you hear me?" he said. "It's going to be different now. Do you understand?" I looked completely through him, trying to count all the gravestones in my head. "Tej, I don't know what to do," he said, his crying eyes meeting mine. "I don't know how to talk to you like Mom did. It's got to be different now. I don't know how, but it's got to be different. Tell me what's going on in your head, will you? Can you tell me? Can you hear me?" I just looked away. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. I cried harder. He took me by the arm and we walked in silence back toward home. A very short walk. Several folding tables were set up in our yard. Crock pots and large Corningwares of food lay out upon them. Our family and friends held paper plates of food, standing with beers in hand, talking. The wake. I walked toward them. Dad's hand felt strange on my shoulder. A woman who was a distant aunt, I think, walked up to my father and embraced him. She expressed her condolences to him. She glanced at me for a moment and then quickly turned back to my father, expressing more condolences. He looked at me and she looked at me, and an expression I'd learned to be sympathy fell across her face as she looked at my father. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I became aware that my parent was being given condolences for the pain of having a child like me. "Tej, why don't you go to your room? Why don't you play your dice games?" I weaved quickly through the minefield of relatives and escaped to my room. I turned on the radio and listened to Top 40 from a Buffalo station. It drowned out the muffled sounds of drunken solace taking place on the other side of my bedroom wall. I set up a chessboard and played both sides against each other, again and again and again. At some point, I finally looked up, and it was dark outside. I stepped out of my room and walked toward the living room. The house was silent. I was hungry. I looked around, hoping to scrounge leftovers from the wake, and I saw my father standing alone in the living room. He was fixated on a family picture of us, taken at Darien Lake Amusement Park 7 years before. It had been a happy day. Matt had convinced me to overcome my fear of the Viper roller coaster, and then we'd ridden it 5 times. We'd gotten stuck at the top of a Ferris wheel for half an hour, but we'd gotten a free bird's eye view of a Billy Joel concert out of it. Mom won a giant stuffed dog at the ring toss booth and lectured me and Matt about how we'd have to share it. On the drive home, Matt and I had fallen asleep, leaning on each other in the back seat in a mutual sugar crash. My father stood like a statue for several minutes, unaware of my presence. Finally, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey and poured himself a small glass. He raised it to his lips and drained it completely in 2 desperate swallows. He slapped it down on the table with a harshness that risked shattering the glass, leaning over it, shoulders flexing, tired and beaten, manly, morose. "Dad," he looked sideways at me and looked back at the picture and then looked at me again. "Dad, I like it when you call me that," he said. "Dad, I don't know what to do either." And we just tell each other for I don't know how long. I walked him to bed, and he passed out in his funeral clothes. I stood there for a few minutes, 14, uncertain about my future and anything else. The house was peaceful and silent. The clock read 11:30 p.m. I left my house and walked down to the cemetery. The full moon cast the only light, just enough for me to find my way, I didn't make it as far as my mother and brother's fresh graves. I stopped at the statue. I fell to my knees before it. I fell asleep holding on to its base, praying that St. Michael would watch over us. So
That's
that's
a,
from,
that's a really intense segment.
that's hard for me to get through, honestly. I
I
mean, it's
think you did it
fiction.
really well. Yeah, but still, I mean, it touches a core piece of who you are.
Yeah. I mean, it never happened. These characters don't exist. And I didn't have a brother, and my mother lived into her 60s, but these characters are as real to me as you are.
Well, of course.
I see them.
Yeah, I think all really good authors have that tangibility with their characters. I know my characters talk to me on a regular basis, and I speak to them as I would anybody else. So
Hmm.
it gets me some weird looks when I'm sitting at Panera writing, but I'm okay with it.
No, 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 that's good. I mean, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to, step out of your skin and share more of yourself
I
than you
agree.
would be normally comfortable.
I
So,
agree. 100%.
and it's hard.
I can't remember who said it. Somebody famous. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader.
Yeah.
It's I always try to keep that emotional tangibility in my writing as well.
I was
So
telling my
when
wife, Becca, I didn't know if I could get through some of these, and she said, that's how you know that's the right thing.
yeah,
Do your best.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. If you struggle with it, then you know it's going to touch a chord in your reader as well. Um, this is as we were talking at the beginning, this is something new, bringing an action hero out into the world who's on the spectrum. What did you find was the thing you were most laser focused on either debunking or getting so totally right it didn't feel like a debunk?
That autistic people have no emotion, which is nonsense. We actually
Really?
have very, very strong, deep emotions. We just don't usually emote. And to write him authentically, a lot of times where a character might normally react emotionally in a situation, he will often not uh, act, but he'll look to nature because he identifies with nature. And he'll see the trees moving in a certain way, or he'll see birds moving, or he'll see the wind, he'll see something. And really, it's my little technique for putting his emotion out there. What he sees in nature, my little gimmick is when he sees in nature is what is really going on in his heart, you
I
know?
think that's a really amazing observation because it allows us to understand the interior mind of your character because we get to see how they're responding to circumstances around them.
Yeah.
It
He's
becomes
deeply emotional, but not always self-aware. But he will see, like almost like transference, he will see in
mm.
the things around him what's really going on in him.
So here's the flip side to that question. What was the easiest part for you in writing this book? Just overall in general scope, what did you find to be the least challenging?
The tech, because I'm a scientist. So, and I was a CIA recruit. And I didn't,
Really?
I never worked for them. But my story is completely different from Thomas's. But when I write about tradecraft and when I write about science and tech, this is
Hmm.
authentic. I'm not making this stuff up. All the tech you see, which isn't as crazy stupid as Mission Impossible movies. This is completely
Right,
realistic. But
right.
this stuff exists. You can even buy some at a hardware store. And, I did a lot of research into the science too, the scientific aspects of the things that are happening, especially in the sequel. And, I made sure that was the fun part for me was getting the science right. Because like if I'm going to write something involving physics, I have a degree in physics, so I should get it right. I don't have a degree in chemistry, so when I write something chemistry, I consult with people to make sure I get the chemistry right,
Well,
you
and
know?
that's very cool because you have a whole team of colleagues that you can go knock on their door and say, "Hey, what about?"
And I did,
And
and I thanked them in the acknowledgments. Uh,
that's really awesome. That's
yeah,
really cool.
no, that's fun. Well, crafting the story itself, thinking up the crazy stuff, well, not that crazy, thinking up the exciting stuff that happens was the easy part for me.
That's very fun. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I'm so glad you came on the program today. Thank you so, so much. And I look forward to having you come back. You're going to come back again, right?
Oh yeah, well,
Okay.
I'm writing a series, and I'll come back and tell you about the next book if you'd like.
I would love that. And
All right,
every book after that, you're welcome in my neighborhood anytime.
thanks.
We'll see you again soon.